give me?
My sacred medicine. Save your strength. This is the easy part.
You won't break me.
You were broken long ago. I release your spirit to travel the underworld. Face the judgment of your ancestors.
Jin, help me. May your death benefit all beings.
Hello everyone. I've been looking forward to talking about the Iki Island expansion with you all. It took me a long time to make my former videos, so I wanted to be just as thorough this time around. Frankly, I had trouble figuring out where to start, so I will begin with an initial overview before breaking down other topics in separate videos. Here, I'll be focusing on what my personal impressions were of the story, and while it's not exactly going to be a review, it will be a critique in spots and not just an analysis. So, where do we even begin? The Iki Island expansion literally changed the whole story of Ghost of Tsushima. That's about as blunt as I can put it. Not that it changed the plot of the main game. In fact, it left Tsushima completely untouched, and we interact with almost no older characters, except for a fun cameo with Kenji. This relatively short story can be completely standalone and interpreted as such. However, what it actually does is reframe and recontextualize so many of the themes of the original story in ways I totally didn't expect. Let's start from the beginning. For those familiar with my earlier video essays, you know that I find the theme of balance as one of the biggest aspects of Ghost of Tsushima, about how opposing sides need to see the strengths in each other, or face mutually assured destruction. I'm extremely fond of the character of Lord Shimura, who is probably my favorite character in the game, other than Jin. However, I always felt that Kazumasa Sakai was someone that Jin should have been more in touch with. To summarize what I've said before, I believe that Jin's tale was about learning to re-embrace his actual father and the Sakai legacy by becoming the ghost. And while that alienated him from the samurai, he remained true to his personal code, and thus retained his true honor. I really felt like the game was pointing to the fact that Kazumasa would have approved of what Jin was doing, and who actually had a compassionate heart despite his depression. Yuriko was absolutely important to coming to these conclusions, and I think many of us would agree with that. Also, the fact that the guiding wind is attributed to Kazumasa left the impression that he guided Jin's actions every step of the way. In short, it was right for Jin to stay a Sakai, and although that would mean he would live on with a crushing penalty on him, he can be assured that he was a good man with the best intentions, despite what he did to anyone. Well, look where we are now. Some initial observations. The word honor is not used in the entire script, anywhere, except a few hallucinations with Shimura, no surprise there. I think this is hugely important to note because it marks a distinct thematic shift away from Tsushima. This story isn't about what honor means, it's about something totally new, but still important to Jin. Instead, the new question is, what does it mean to be a samurai in the first place? And yet, I think the conclusion we come to is rather similar to what we experienced in the main game, and I will go into that later. A whole new side to Jin's story has been revealed, and most importantly, the characters of Lord Kazumasa Sakai and Lady Sakai, who we now know as Chiyoko. Two very different parental figures in Jin's childhood, ones that he had very different relationships with. And furthermore, we learn about how Jin interacted with them, and what this says about his character then and now. Here comes my first real impression, the one that I really took most out of the DLC. My expectations were completely subverted about Kazumasa Sakai. I really wanted him to be someone different. I wanted him to be a fairly good man, despite his weaknesses and dark tendencies, and have something meaningful to bestow on Jin, perhaps something Jin forgot. I even was in denial at the beginning that perhaps Jin's memories had been warped by the trauma and the eagle's poison, and that when he overcame his guilt, he would remember the truth about his father, that he wasn't so bad. But that's simply not what happens. This story is brutal. The retelling of the Sakai invasion shows a man who has completely gone out of balance and is drowning in his own darkness. What light is still left in him is so damaged that it's only young Jin who is able to take it back out of him. Jin is in a constant emotional turmoil as he experiences the ruthless judgment of Iki Island's residents about what his father, the samurai, had done to them. Because of the eagle's hallucinogen, Jin is constantly in a schizophrenic state, which exaggerates his negative emotions when anything happens to him. He feels the judgment of his own father over him in the present day just as much as it would have been in the past. He remembers all kinds of regrets and failures he suppressed, and now they just pile up on him to the point the player might go insane just watching him break. And yet, all we can do is see Jin's memories as if looking through a window. There is no way to change what happened, and that's probably one of the hardest things to watch in the whole game. Jin's only choice in the present is how to respond to what has been set in stone. However, Kazumasa is not simply a villain. I will go into a deeper dive on the Butcher of Iki at a separate point, but there's too much to say about his character alone for a single overview. On the other hand, Jin's mother, Chioko, is depicted in the most healthy light possible. She is characterized as having had nothing but unconditional love for Jin, as she encouraged all the opposite virtues that Kazumasa ever showed. The memories shown through the use of music and nature showed just how wise and balanced of a person she really was. Even when stricken with illness, her strength was found through serenity and remembering the things that were most important, living in the moment, living in harmony with nature, and loving the people around her. We never see a flashback of Chioko, but she was truly the heart of the Sakai family, something Kazumasa finally admitted to Jin in their final days together. I will also analyze her in more detail in the future, including what these revelations mean in regards to her more famous older brother. For now, let's get on with the story at hand, the tale of Jin Sakai on Iki Island. We begin with a rumor on Tsushima of Mongols causing peasants to lose their minds. Jin, the investigator, comes to the scene of the crime, a Mongol camp in Akashima, bearing a tribe symbol he doesn't recognize. Here he finds evidence that the peasants have been given a sort of drug that makes them hallucinate and see horrible things. Furthermore, this tribe uses psycho-spiritual warfare, with the shamans and the bone-chilling horns made to sound like human screaming. Terror is their weapon, and they pull no punches when it comes to fighting a well-armed samurai. But Jin only gets a taste of what's to come. Jin learns that these Mongols are currently situated on Iki Island and plan to use their influence there to attack Tsushima. An onslaught from both east and west, as well as the power of this strange drug, would cause more destruction than anything Tsushima has yet faced. Throwing caution to the wind, Jin takes a chance and goes there alone to stop them. This rather reckless decision, however well-meaning, is perhaps the first sign that Jin is hoping to just barrel through this challenge the same way he always would. Don't involve anyone who isn't necessary, don't think too deeply about what you're doing, and just do what you have to. And most importantly, leave your personal feelings at bay. This time, he doesn't get to make that choice. Jin is shipwrecked on the island without his horse and no way off when he gets captured by the Mongols. He meets Angsar Khatun, otherwise known as the Eagle, the leader of this new tribe. Jin makes a bluff to seem threatening in this hopeless situation, but the Eagle is unfazed. She force feeds a poisonous drink to him, likely made from juniper, a berry with hallucinogenic properties. She initiates him onto a sort of journey through the underworld, where he can expect to face his ancestors and other spirits of the past. Jin is normally not superstitious, but this is an unsettling proposition. What kinds of things will he be forced to see? And how long is it going to last? The Eagle is pleased to find that Jin not only survives the drug, but hallucinates her to become his best ally and friend, Yuna. Through this state, the Eagle probes him to reveal he is totally alone, and no allies are with him. He also reveals his personal connection to the island, that his father, Kazumasa Sakai, once tried to wipe out the raiders on the island, but was killed, specifically at Senjo Gorge. Lastly, the Eagle probes him to reveal his greatest guilt, that he felt responsible for his father's death. This proves to be a valuable weapon to the Eagle, and so she reveals herself and makes her first proposal. Let her heal him from his emotional wounds, and then help her to, quote-unquote, heal Iki Island, Tsushima, and anyone else in her way. How she proposes to make Jin whole again is unclear at this point, but it would require an alliance, which Jin could never accept. The Eagle is not concerned when Jin flees the scene and lets him go on his spiritual journey. It is more important that he chooses to come back to her than use physical force to get what she wants. This apparent contrast with Khotun Khan's use of force is shown in several of the Eagle's messages to the island residents. The Eagle is a false mother, supposing herself to be a nurturer of her victims, but has no genuine interest in the well-being of those she wishes to control. Jin has a particularly vivid hallucinatory trip as he is trying to escape, and he not only relives those final frantic moments with his father, but hears all sorts of verbal abuse. Kazumasa shames him for being weak and clumsy, and more like a poet than a samurai. As a side note, that's actually really ironic, because Lord Shimura was a poet samurai, and seems to have been both just fine. Kazumasa only sees Jin as a liability to the continuation of their clan. It's unclear if Jin is making up these memories, or if Kazumasa actually said these things at some point. But in the moment, his father is nothing but a raging tyrant, someone Jin can't possibly hope to please. It's all over between them, and the relationship is broken by the time he wakes up out of the trip to see a common stranger coming to his aid. This man introduces himself as Tenzo, but not without huge distrust of Jin. He knows what kind of person Jin is, and also that he had just been drugged. Tenzo is a raider, and has no interest in making friends with a so-called law enforcer. Iki has been samurai-free for generations, besides that one incident bitterly known as the Sakai invasion. However, much like Jin, Tenzo is willing to make allies in unlikely places, and recruits Jin to aid the raiders against the Mongols. Again, hatred of the Mongols is a common denominator that either strengthens or weakens bonds between characters in this game. Tenzo is probably the first person Jin has ever interacted with who gives zero regard for his class status, making Jin have to prove his trust and skill before introducing him to the raiders and to the captain, Fune. Jin has to work from the ground up to prove his merit, and perhaps dig himself out of a hole as well. Jin hides his identity on Iki Island, knowing that all potential alliances will be impossible if they cannot trust him. But the Eagle has every aim to undermine his plans. When interrogating a Mongol, Tenzo finds out that Jin is the son of Kazumasa Sakai, the butcher of Iki. This enrages him for more than one reason. First, Jin has lied to him, and he has every reason to believe that Jin will be out for revenge after getting rid of the Mongol threat. Secondly, Tenzo has a personal history with Kazumasa, which he'd rather not disclose either, especially when in the presence of a well-armed, well-trained warrior like Jin Sakai. That will be his error later, when he withholds the truth from Jin for the same reason Jin is withholding his identity. There are more important things to worry about. As Jin and Tenzo journey together, completing various campaigns against the Mongols, they learn a bit more about each other. Even though Tenzo has robbed and killed many merchants, he has a long history on the island, a close relationship with Fune, and was once a family man before his wife died in childbirth. He is also a spiritual man, and this is not a recent coming to faith, but goes far back into his youth. At this point, Jin becomes sympathetic for Tenzo, who hasn't chosen his lot in life, but only seeks to bring some sort of peace and order to his home, just without the meddling of a samurai. If Jin came to Iki Island wondering if he could perhaps subjugate these people under Lord Shimura and the Shogun once again, he certainly has his doubts now if it would even be the right thing to do, let alone worth the cost of what a new war would achieve. Tenzo goes into a lot of personal detail about the Sakai invasion, about seeing a lot of his good friends die, and how angered the people became afterwards. Jin cannot deny that the butcher of Iki was indeed cruel, slaughtering relatively innocent people just to make a point and instill fear and respect. Instead, as Lord Shimura would have put it, the use of too much force made Kazumasa lose opportunity, and now the people of Iki will never have the samurai back willingly. When you kill all people who oppose you, who do you have left to rule? This is the tyrant's fist, and not a good leader's hand. I am leaving out some crucial details of the Sakai invasion for now, and will bring them up in an essay only about Kazumasa, so it befits us in the meantime to at least qualify that earlier statement. The samurai invasion of Iki wasn't a black and white situation, and the game doesn't force you to think a certain way about it. As for Jin, he holds to his faith in what the samurai can ultimately be, rather than dismiss the whole faction as tyrannical. But Jin's interactions with Tenzo and Fune definitely pull him away from that undying loyalty to the samurai he used to have. They're just like Yuna in that respect. Honor and goodness can be found in unexpected places if you broaden your horizons. Moving back to the story, Jin proves his worth to Fune when he helps take down the Eagle's warship, but Tenzo reveals that he knows the truth about Jin. They will keep the knowledge private for now, but Jin warns him that this has been used as a weapon to divide them, to use the past to interfere with the present, and Tenzo accedes to this. At the Battle of Kirofure, Jin is successful at guiding the raiders to victory, but to his shock, he finds Tenzo reciting a prayer he heard once before, from the mouth of his father's killer. The truth is revealed, and Jin unleashes all his fury at Tenzo, who can only accept death at this moment. I do believe that while Tenzo had no remorse for giving the final death blow on Kazumasa, he does at this point have some remorse about what it did to Jin. Their exchange is raw and disturbing, with Jin even about to kill him. Perhaps even Tenzo wants it at this point. But Jin knows where that path will take him, and he chooses not to be like his father. Perhaps the most important moment is when Tenzo says that Jin has been lying to himself this whole time, not just about who Kazumasa was, but what the samurai always were, and what the Sakai invasion really achieved. In Jin's efforts to repress a lot of his regrets, he justified the invasion as much as he could in his mind, so that he wouldn't have to hate his father. The truth is, he'd much rather view his father as someone good and who deserved to be honored. He'd rather have a father figure to look up to than one he would have to condemn. That's how Jin ever felt about Lord Shimura, too. To see his icons be brought low by the bitter truth is something that Jin really has trouble handling, be it Kazumasa or Shimura, but it's something he has to face. He has to willingly dismantle his opinion of Kazumasa and look at him for who he really was. A biological father who failed to bond with him, who Jin was not responsible for when things went wrong, and who Jin owes no obligation to follow. At the finale of the story, Jin realizes where the eagle has been waiting to meet him, Senjo Gorge, the place where his father died. Fune refuses to join him, seeing him still as the butcher's son when it's revealed to her. But Tenzo sees something more in Jin this time and offers to fight by his side. Tenzo sees that Jin needs help, and to withhold support at a time like this could lead to catastrophe. Jin is completely overwhelmed by hallucinations and is taunted with all his fears and regrets worse than ever, but Tenzo is there to keep him together. Once they confront the eagle on the shores of Senjo Gorge, she reveals to Jin the true nature of the gift, power to influence others and to control them. If Jin would be her shaman and representative to the people of Japan, he would have greater power than any samurai before him, being able to soar over them in the eternal blue sky. But Jin throws this back in her face, saying he serves the people he leads, not soars over them. And yes, he will even serve raiders who would otherwise be his enemy any other day. The eagle curses him and casts him back into the last hallucination. Since this is the location of Kazumasa's death, Jin sees that moment more vividly than ever. But rather than repeat the same way it has over and over again in his mind, he stops his father from being killed and talks to him instead. To Jin's dismay, Kazumasa has remained Kazumasa. Not a rosy image, not a good father, not even a truly good man. Kazumasa says they should have died together as warriors, and because Jin chose to live, the Sakai name needs redemption. The only way to do that is to avenge his death and kill Tenzo. Jin is finally honest and comes out to say that Kazumasa wasn't a good father to him, but Kazumasa says he only did what he knew how, and that was to make Jin a samurai rather than a son. So the offer stands. Be a samurai, avenge the Sakai name, and finally get the approval from his father figure that he always wanted. In other circumstances, this would be the hardest temptation Jin could ever face, and if he fell to it, he'd probably fall into darkness and become just as ruthless and bitter as Kazumasa. But Jin has learned enough from his experiences to know how to respond to his father's dying wish. Just as Jin can reject Lord Shimura's last wish, Jin chooses to reject his father's order. I will never be like you. The way you lived was not my choice. Your death was not my fault. Jin's pledge and pronouncement set him free from the hallucination and allows him to save Tenzo and defeat the eagle. Tenzo has been badly wounded and is now vulnerable, but Jin's thoughts are only compassion toward him now. Jin spends one last moment alone on the shore, contemplating his father's death, and so casts his father's soul to the wind. Regardless of who Kazumasa was, Jin has made the decision to still love his father, to acknowledge the truth, and to let him go. While it would have been best to see a scene like this in the present day and not have it undercut by being a hallucination, it was still probably one of the most powerful moments of the whole game, including the main story. To wrap things up, Tenzo decides to retire from his former life and be a mentor for those in the island still affected by the eagle's poison. It's a more fitting role for someone who really had a heart for healing people and not for robbing and killing. As for Fune, she finally opens up to Jin about her own life story, dealing with a daughter caught up in drug addiction, and admits she is a hypocrite, willing to break her own law to show favoritism and keep her daughter alive. Sounds familiar? She thinks so too, and while she'll never like the samurai, she is a bit humbler now for knowing Jin.
One day, you will face the judgment of your ancestors. one.
May your death benefit all beings.
One of the things I appreciated most about the Iki Island story was how it made a lot of themes explicit, which in the main story were implicit. To be honest, I was really pleased to be affirmed in a couple of my theories, while others were completely broken down. One theory affirmed in particular was what I've always felt was the core weakness of Jin, something that followed him his whole life and eventually costed him everything. It's clear that Jin put too much of his identity in his role models. This made the eagle the perfect antagonist for Jin, possibly more dangerous than Khotun Khan, because she knew how to exploit this weakness so painfully, and it was all the more satisfying to see Jin put an end to her accusations and lies. Jin was haunted by an idealist vision of his father that he was obsessed with pleasing, keeping him on a pedestal, immune to criticism or defiance. If he couldn't please his father, it was because something was wrong with him and not his father. Then when Kazumasa died, Jin simply continued this behavior with Shimura, vowing never to disappoint his uncle in anything, to the point when his uncle eventually disappoints him, he is way more devastated than he should have been, and thus turns on Shimura without mercy. But rather than Ghost of Tsushima being a story of turning from one mentor to another, the final takeaway is that Jin had to walk away from both his father and his uncle in order to become his fullest self. Jin has to put both the legacy of Clan Sakai and Shimura in their places and not have them define him. Now we know from the Iki Island story that the ghost is neither Sakai nor Shimura. The ghost is more adaptable and resilient than Clan Shimura ever was, and the ghost is kinder than Clan Sakai ever deemed itself to be. However, I use the term walk away lightly, because Jin actually improves upon both sides of his family by combining their best traits, instead of dismissing them all entirely. I can't help feeling that this makes the story of Jin that much more depressing, though. I just can't see Kazumasa approving of the ghost now, despite what Yuriko said before. Jin is too defiant of his elders, and challenges the status quo too much. Kazumasa, despite his differences with Lord Shimura, was all about honoring one's clan and obeying authority at all costs. Shimura might have been willing to order soldiers into a battle they couldn't win, but Kazumasa was willing to order soldiers to commit atrocities against innocent people. Jin would have had to face the disapproval of both his family members if he were still alive, and maybe Kazumasa would have killed him too if given the order. Jin is truly alone in the world, left with no family or allies, except those who are willing to take him at his own terms. If I were Jin, I would be tempted to completely disappear from the world and become a recluse. He sacrificed everything, and yet was given no respect, no honor. So why should he ever help the world again? But I think if the tale of Jin continues, it's not in his spirit to abandon the island he loves, and will always come to the aid of those in need. Yes, even those who are his enemies. I'm really grateful to the people who have checked out my channel in the last few months. Your support means a lot to me. I don't think the general hype about Ghost of Tsushima is going to die off anytime soon, and there's so much more to explore about the game even now, so I plan on making this channel as much as possible about the game and eventual movie when that comes out. Am I ever going to do Star Wars content again? Probably, once there's something I really want to talk about. For now, thank you for joining, and I'll see you all next time.